2016 saw a new look MotoGP now, perhaps not so much from the outside, but with a new tyre manufacturer, obviously bringing a different type of tyre, a new unified software for everyone was meant to essentially make the racing that little bit closer and really shake things up. Now, for anyone who did watch, I think they can say it certainly worked. But I don't think many people would have predicted exactly the type of season we had, especially not the amount of winners we had.
The talk in Qatar would, however, be focused on Yamaha contracts rather than winners. Rossi had re-signed until 2018, and unhappy Lorenzo was weighing up an offer from Ducati. Tension before the season had even started. But some loving mechanics and a twist of the wrist soon got things underway as the talking could start on track at the season opener in the Middle East under the floodlights. Some new big wings and loads of horsepower soon gave the impression this might be Ducati's year. A feisty battle in red for the lead. An even more feisty battle behind between Rossi versus Marquez. Just how would they get along in 2016? Heartbreak for Iannone as the Ducatis came under pressure. Lorenzo made it through. And then Marquez had a go. First time okay, second time in the final corner, too wide. Someone who timed everything to perfection that day, Jorge Lorenzo, on the podium with his teammate in fourth. The talk had stopped and the season was on. Temas de Rio Hondo in Argentina, and the tyres didn't play along. An issue with Scott Redding's rear in practice forced new tyre supplier Michelin and the race direction to declare a two-part race with a mandatory bike swap halfway, with a harder tyre for safety reasons. But riders are riders and they will race whatever you put in front of them. Race number 2 was underway, albeit on a slightly damp track. Marquez in his element, Rossi in tow. The battle looked imminent. Lorenzo, on the other hand, was not continuing as he'd started. So it was left to bitter rivals to provide the entertainment, a sight not unfamiliar to the Argentinian track. As they fought, others decided to switch as early as they could. And one of those, Maverick Vinales. With no time left, the leaders were neck and neck. But for how long? Vinales found a damp patch whilst lapping third, whilst Rossi's second bike was not exactly to his liking. The boys in red honed in, and their compatriot was off the podium. But it's never over until the very end. The Ducati dream ended 200 metres from the finish line. Rossi and Pedrosa the lucky ones, as a victorious Marquez judged track conditions to perfection, though slightly underestimated grip levels on the podium. Austin, Texas, and riders still had to race the harder and safer rear Michelin tyre. Good for some, not so for others. Lorenzo's first lap on the brakes being one to forget, whilst the bigger problem, that of a burnt clutch, would belong to his teammate Rossi. Just listen. Trying to make up time in the corners would end like this for the Italian. Whilst Dovizioso's season was going from bad to worse. A painful yet entirely unintentional prod from Dani Pedrosa compounding the Ducati rider's misery. But the front end folds wouldn't stop there. Next up, Cal Crutchlow and Bradley Smith. No such problems for the King of Texas though, the man who has won here ever since it opened, Marc Marquez. The tracks got smaller yet more familiar. The European rounds were underway. First stop, Jerez. And the big news was Lorenzo had signed for Ducati next year. And the smaller news, everyone was now jumping on the winglets bandwagon. Joy for every techie watching MotoGP. After 2 cool days of practice, race day was a hot affair and no one knew how the bikes or tyres would behave. With the weight off his shoulders, Lorenzo looked rejuvenated. But his teammate happens to quite like Jerez. Dovizioso, what could we say? Taken out this time by a technical problem. There are no such problems up front as Rossi got his season back on track on Spanish soil. Off to France, and talk was all about Lorenzo's vacant seat next year. Initial speculation, Viñales, or even Dani Pedrosa. On track, and it was time to introduce a new style rear tyre at Michelin's home race. Something a little softer. Music to a certain number 99. Anti-wheelie winglets got even more extreme, with Honda also having to choose the hardest front tyre to make up time in the braking zones. Not the easiest race to manage. Lorenzo in dreamland, Kel Crutchlow in the gravel. The Suzukis went toe-to-toe, as a Tito Rabat crash was the second warning sign that the hard front for the Hondas was a handful. Rossi was making up for his bad start, first with Marquez, then Dovizioso, who then somehow managed to do this. Nothing on the track, different front tyres, and zero contact, yet identical crashes. With little but the triple winglets intact, Marquez would at least salvage some points. Though not the 25 points that belong to the man of the day, Jorge Lorenzo, as Maverick Viñales managed his first ever MotoGP podium in third, making those contract talks even tougher. Though not so tough, he signed for Yamaha before Mugello and all the others fell into place. Pedrosa would stay, so would Dovizioso, and Iannone would replace Viñales at Suzuki. All this, and we hadn't even completed 6 races. On track, and for once it was the bike making the headlines. Lorenzo blew an engine in the final minutes of Sunday warm-up. Yamaha wasn't too concerned, so Rossi's side didn't swap engines, as his had a lower mileage than Lorenzo's broken one. Lorenzo's engine for the race only had free practice 2 on it, so both riders with pretty even Mugello mileage on their race engines. So their bikes seemed pretty even, and the riders looked pretty even. It was on. At least, so we thought. Rossi suddenly slowed, and his worst fears at his home race came true. The same issue as Lorenzo. An engine blown, just like his hopes of a home win. Thankfully, there were 2 other teammates still in the battle, though Dovizioso would struggle with arm pump, meaning Pedrosa had to take over the reins. Despite Rossi being out, Lorenzo did not have it easy. Marquez found his way towards the end and made life very tough for the Yamaha man. Both men on fire. Marquez looked set for the win, but with too much anti-wheelie cutting the power, it was strike 3 Lorenzo. And the engine problems? Afterwards, it was revealed an accidental full throttle over rev, jumping over the crest at the end of the straight. Off to Catalonia, and it was a sombre affair. Moto2 rider Luis Salom tragically lost his life in the Friday free practice, and the paddock mourned together. His family insisted they race, but for safety reasons it was held on the Formula 1 style layout instead of the normal one. A new turn 10, 11 and 13, as well as an added chicane before the main straight. A mentally tough race for many reasons. But did they put on a show for their fallen companion? Viñales would not give Pedrosa any space to breathe, whilst Rossi gave a taste of things to come as he passed Marquez to hunt down early leader Lorenzo. The Spanish track seemed to spur on the Italian as first him, Then Marquez demoted Lorenzo to third, a position he would not hold for much longer. Lorenzo was struggling. And to compound his misery, Iannone did this. So it was Rossi versus Marquez for the win, the battle everyone had been waiting for. Rossi looked smooth, Marquez on the edge. Rossi would take the win, but a newfound sense of what was really important on a very difficult weekend for all seemed the real winner that day. Round number 8 in Assen, and the riders were pretty much used to the Michelins by now. Though we're talking about slicks. Wet tyres were a different story. Colombian Yoni Hernandez led the way for quite some laps before sadly crashing out, as yet more Ducatis, Dovizioso, Petrucci and Redding relegated Rossi in the rain. His saviour for now? The red flag. The rain was just too heavy. But it calmed down and a shortened race restarted. Yet conditions were not what you would call a lot easier. Crashes for Pedrosa, then Cal Crutchlow. As Marquez set about hunting Rossi down at the front. A job made easier for the Honda man by Rossi himself. Marquez looked set until an Aussie surprise snuck up from behind. Jack Miller having the ride of his life. Paul Espargaro and Scott Redding were battling for the final podium slot as Jorge Lorenzo, down in 10th place, revealed to the world that these wet tyres were not to his liking. Miller, on the other hand, loved them and treated them to a good old-fashioned burnout. MotoGP victory number 1 for the young Australian. Moving east to Germany, and the weather still wouldn't play along. A very wet Sunday warm-up and a very fast crash for Marquez. He was lucky to escape relatively unscathed, whilst local boy Stefan Bradl would rule himself out for the afternoon's race, a home GP to forget. Come afternoon, and the track was wet, but there was no rain. Danilo Petrucci once again showed off his prowess in tricky conditions, as other riders made fans look up. Avintia's Hector Barbera looking very much at home at the Sachsenring. Petrucci's lead would sadly end in the gravel trap, as Marquez amazingly managed to hang on. Conditions were changing and the number 2 bikes were ready. Rossi's here with intermediate tyres. Cal Crutchlow was putting on a show with his satellite Honda as Andrea Iannone became the first man to switch to intermediates. The track was drying. Marquez soon followed suit, but unbelievably went on full slicks. Though by lap 20, the lap time showed he'd chosen correctly, a second faster than the intermediates. So most had changed, Rossi hadn't, still lapping on wet and dropping back. Marquez was on rails, however, as him and Crutchlow both on slicks led home Dovizioso, who had a rear slick and intermediate front. A short summer break later, and the ominous-looking Bull welcomed the grid to the new edition on the calendar at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. Horsepower was key, all eyes on Ducati. Iannone chose the softer option rear as his competitors went hard. He took an early lead, slowed the pace by half a second and conserved his rear tyre. Dovizioso then got past and upped the pace by half a second. Though with his softer rear still intact, Iannone would have the upper hand. His first ever win and Ducati's first since 2010. Italy had conquered Austria. Renault, the race that's never wet, except this year. It was Sachsenring all over again. A wet track, but no rain. A nervous grid would struggle with tyre choice, Soft for Marquez, soft front, hard rear for the Yamahas. Who had got it right? Dovizioso chewed up his front tyre too soon, as someone called Cal Crutchlow reminded people that going for hard rain tyres all round had also been an option. One by one, the Brit was carving his way through the field, as Rossi and Marquez were once again locked in a juicy battle for the podium. Lorenzo suffered the same woes as Dovizioso, whilst Rossi was that little bit nicer to his front tyre. Iannone and Barbera impressive, but Marquez could not lose too many points to Rossi. He had to dig deep. Yet the story of the day was Cal Crutchlow, who'd recently become a dad, celebrating his first ever MotoGP victory. The number of winners for 2016 was stacking up. Rossi and Marquez on the rostrum, as a very impressive Avintia team finished 4th and 5th with Barbera and Baz. Maiden GP win? Family comes first. The Brit from Brno was out for a repeat at his home race in Silverstone. Him and Vinales and Rossi chose the hard front tyre, and much to people's surprise, Marquez the soft. But tyres weren't the talk early on, as Maverick Vinales was putting in the ride of his life on the Suzuki at the front of the race. Rossi was vying for second, though Marquez had other ideas. Yet another duel between the two foes, this time captured up close and personal. Marquez would win that particular one, and did then not want to lose to a satellite team. Honda versus Honda, Marquez versus Crutchlow. Soft front versus hard front. None of the battles behind could, however, match the brilliance of Maverick Vinales on a British Sunday as he took his first MotoGP victory and Suzuki's first since they returned to the Premier Class. 2016 winner, number 7. Misano, the second home race for Rossi and a chance to make up for the Mugello misery. Lorenzo with his usual lightning start. Rossi as aggressive as it gets. All fair and square and into the lead. It looked like Italy would get its wish, had it not been for a little Spaniard on a Repsol Honda machine. No, not Marquez, Dani Pedrosa. Lorenzo for second, then Rossi for first. A great ride from winner number 8. An Italian had won all the Spanish races so far, and a Spaniard had won the Italian races. Would that trend continue in Aragon? With an early mistake from Marquez and Rossi on the move, it was looking very likely. But never rule out the world champions. Lorenzo was on the move, and Marquez had refound his stride. Rossi down to second. And then down to third. The championship challenge was taking a hit. One last lunge and flashbacks to Iannone in Catalonia. This was not going to be the day. Marquez had firmed up his lead and was now in championship contention. But to win that championship in Japan was a rather far-fetched idea. Rossi would have to finish lower than 15th, Lorenzo lower than 4th, and Marquez win. But the story before the race was a broken collarbone for Pedrosa and a very close shave for Lorenzo, though the latter would be declared fit to race. Could either Yamaha rider stop Marquez. From the off, it looked like they could stop him. But Marquez was having a very good day. As was Valentino Rossi, until this happened. Rossi out, it said, and it was down to Lorenzo to keep the championship alive. The Suzukis would fight it out for the podium as Lorenzo did the unthinkable. If the race ended now, Marquez would be champion. And that he was. Arguably the most unexpected of his career. Joy for the 5-time world champion, winning his 3rd crown in the Premier class. So a title decided a little earlier than some thought, or hoped. But at least the next trap was Phillip Island, a rider's favourite. A damp qualifying saw Vinales, Rossi and Lorenzo far down the grid, leaving them quite a mountain to climb. Pol Espargaro showed what he could do if conditions were right, though was soon demoted by Marquez, as Vinales and co fought their way up. But the young Spaniard gave it his all on a rather chilly day at the island and hung on from tremendous pressure from Brno winner Cal Crutchlow and older Espargaro brother Aleix. Crutchlow up to 2nd, Vinales up to 7th. But could anyone beat Marc Marquez? Yes, he himself could. The first bit of world champion overconfidence was punished without mercy. Marquez out, Crutchlow in the lead. Next to follow, Aleix Espargaro, just as he was battling his teammate for the podium. No such issues for the king of the island, Cal Crutchlow, with his 2nd ever MotoGP win and 1st in dry conditions. When it rains in Malaysia, it rains a lot. The only positive? Well, they'd certainly had enough wet practice throughout the year. Rossi the man to take the lead early on, though Andrea Iannone, fresh back from injury, had other ideas. Yet the 9-time world champion would not give up the lead without a fight. Newly crowned champion Marc Marquez continued his title jinx as he crashed out for the 2nd time in a row. As previous race winner Crutchlow suffered a rather painful crash as well. A sign of just how tough things were, Iannone was next on the list. His teammate Andrea Dovizioso was however faring somewhat better as he made his way into the lead with 5 laps to go. Rossi was struggling. Honourable mentions once again to the impressive Avintia pair of Barbara and Baz, lapping in 4th and 5th just as they had done in Brno. But no one would trump the man of the moment in Malaysia. Andrea Dovizioso picking up his 2nd ever MotoGP win and 1st for Ducati. Congratulations to winner number 9. Yes, 9. And behind him, Rossi stood up 2nd in the championship. So Valencia was more about pride than anything else. Many would switch teams after the final race, so everyone wanted to go out on a high. None more so than Marc Marquez, the world champion who'd crashed at every race since winning the title. Lorenzo was off into the distance. Marquez struggled early with a burnt clutch, so Rossi was leading the charge for 2nd, but Iannone was looking in ominous form. Marquez would bounce back, however, and bounce back he did. Past Iannone, and at least try and catch Lorenzo. Rossi gave it one last go against his compatriot, but the Ducati man was too strong. At the front, there looked like there could still be a twist. Lorenzo struggling a lot in the final laps with Marquez on the charge. But the ex-world champion did just enough to hang on and say goodbye to Yamaha in style. Burnouts and fireworks. No better way to start 2017.
So the championship didn't go quite down to the wire as it did last year, but with all those different winners, I think we had a different type of excitement in 2016. Now, we do hope you can stay tuned to the off-season show this winter, where we're going to prepare you for the 2017 season. We're going to take a little trip to find out more about the inner workings of MotoGP technology, so you know that much more about what goes on in these amazing machines. See you then.